In the last video, we delved below the surface into the chill waters of My Hero Academia's iceberg, and now my friends, we're back with our diving gear equipped because this iceberg is still hiding big secrets left for us to drag out from the depths. But first, before we delve into the sunlight zone in tier 3, as I prepare my tanks for this expedition, I want to ask you to please hit that subscribe button and think about leaving a like if you learn anything interesting from this video or it just keeps you busy for a while. And once the video is over, I'd love it if you went over to the comment section below and let me know what your favorite piece of info was from our expedition. But with that said, I'm all ready, so let's dive on below. First off, in the last video, I promised to get to the bottom of what exactly Taco Bell was doing down here in a My Hero Academia iceberg, and I finally got down to the bottom of it. In 2018, the fast food brand Taco Bell would start serving a new product at their stores, one that drove all of humanity to the brink with just how crazy they went over this snack. Am I talking about the Doritos Locos Tacos? Do I mean the cinnamon twists or the 5-layer burrito? No. I, of course, am talking about the cheesy goodness of Taco Bell's nacho fries. These fries were introduced in 2018 as a test item for the Taco Bell menu, and an order would feature fries coated in a mix of Mexican spices paired with a decent helping of warm, if you're lucky, nacho cheese sauce to dip the fries into. It was some real classy eating and didn't need much marketing, especially not once My Hero Academia got involved. In 2021, a user known as Pixel Drink on YouTube uploaded a video titled Deku Taco Bell ad, and the rest was history.
Run to Taco Bell, cause nacho fries are back. Head to Taco Bell and silence your cravings before nacho fries disappear again. Only at Taco Bell, at participating US locations for a limited time only.
Now this of course blew up on TikTok, where eventually users would post videos of their captures on their phones from the Spotify app, where allegedly Spotify actually used a very similar ad to the one that was originally memed with a Deku sound-alike to match.
Savory Mexican spices will not let you get away. So there's only one thing left to do. Run to Taco Bell, because nacho fries are back. Head to Taco Bell and silence your cravings before nacho fries disappear again. Only at...
Now this is a good time to remind you that this video isn't sponsored by Taco Bell or anyone else besides the Pineapple Dive team, so to make sure that we make it to the bottom, make sure you support the channel, whether that's by subscribing or joining as a member, or even leaving a small super thanks to keep our explorers nourished for the trip below. Horikoshi's mask. Kohei Horikoshi hasn't been seen out in public very much, and he's only made a few trips over the course of the run of My Hero Academia. One of the places Horikoshi traveled to was the US, where he attended San Diego Comic-Con during the height of My Hero Academia's popularity here in the States. At that time, Horikoshi was seen for the very first time for many fans of the series, but something that a lot of fans may notice or have questions about is the mask that Horikoshi wears at times, like in interviews that we've seen him in from Japan. Horikoshi's mask is black and covers the entire bottom half of his face, from the nose to his chin and his cheeks, and it's a sleek leather mask, but also seems to have some sort of metal rings or studding around the cheekbones. It also seems to have two sort of holes in the bottom for breathing, and when Horikoshi wants to, he also pairs the mask with a large pair of goggles or glasses that have 3 spikes coming out near the top on both sides that look just like something that he would just give to a character in his series. Now the design of the mask itself is likely a reference to a specific pair of characters in Naruto called the Demon Brothers, who during an interview alongside Kishimoto himself, Horikoshi said he was a big fan of, to Kishi's shock that Horikoshi loved such small characters from the beginning of the series. Hori's mask looks just like the mask that one of the Demon Brothers wears, albeit without the small metal pieces on the cheek. Now the decision to wear a mask at all is something that is common with mangaka in Japan, as they find their privacy to be really important, like I'm sure you would, and many mangaka would rather not get recognized in public when they're free on the little time that they have, which can help them avoid overzealous fans or just straight up fan backlash. And through many interviews, we've been able to pick up that Horikoshi is a private person and very hardworking, but he also takes criticism very harshly, so the mask, like it would for any hero, likely helps the author feel more comfortable in his persona. Horikoshi art exchanges. Staying with the topic of Horikoshi for a second, Kohei Horikoshi is known very well for his art, with several legendary authors like Kishimoto, Kubo, and Oda all praising his artwork. Stories from other mangaka paint the picture that Horikoshi is a mangaka that a lot of the younger mangaka look up to as an amazing peer, and over the course of the last few years, a few mangaka like Gege Akutami and Yuki Tabata from Jujutsu Kaisen and Black Clover respectively have become really close with the My Hero author. Because of this friendship and the fact that Horikoshi is really supportive of his peers, Horikoshi has done several art exchanges where he draws another mangaka's characters and they do the same for him, with the first notable one being between Black Clover and My Hero Academia. Here is the image that was released when this art exchange initially happened, with Tabata drawing Bakugo, Shoto, All Might, and Deku during the sports festival, and Horikoshi doing a drawing of Asta, Yuno, and Noelle early on in the story for his side. Personally, I'm a fan of Tabata's art, however I don't think it lent itself perfectly to some of the characters like Bakugo and All Might, who I feel are drawn a little oddly. But Horikoshi's artwork of the Black Clover characters was really polished, and I feel like the original characters weren't lost in his style. Later on, in another art for Horikoshi, Tabata came back and brought the fire as he drew Mirko and Hawks looking amazing on this image that you can see here. For Gege Akutami, things came together more slowly, with Horikoshi first recommending Jujutsu Kaisen to readers and having that comment on a special band that came with volume 5 of the manga, where Horikoshi says Jujutsu Kaisen is the manga that will carry Jump on its back next, and also saying it's an honor to fight alongside you to Akutami. To go with this message, Horikoshi also drew Yuji Itadori, the main character of Jujutsu Kaisen, in an art that you can see here. For the release of volume 6 of JJK, Horikoshi actually drew a special page for the volume with a note to Gege Akutami saying congratulations on volume 6. I always look forward to reading JJK, Mahito's my favorite, and thanks for letting me drop in. On the page we can see Yuji again, now joined by Nobara, Megumi, and Gojo, all done in a style that complements the original so much that it just makes me wish these two would end their manga and do another one together. Finally, as far as Akutami goes though, with the release of My Hero Academia Volume 23, the JJK author was able to pay Horikoshi back for the earlier art when he drew a special page for Volume 23 featuring the League of Villains including Dabi, Shigaraki, Toga, Compress, Spinner, and Twice, all running from Bakugo, Shoto, Deku, and All Might, who is seen smashing out of the ground even though this is long after All Might's time has been over. It's a really great art, and I love how Dabi and Shigaraki both look in Akutami's art style, and Bakugo literally fits right in like a puzzle piece. To go with this art, the author's comment said, "Congratulations on volume 23, thanks for giving me a page in this book, I admire your work on My Hero Academia so much, plus Ultra." And since then, Akutami has also drawn Aizawa in his own style, mimicking what you'd normally see on a JJK volume cover, and again, especially now just in color, it looks so right. Going back a generation to mangaka from the big three though, we've actually seen legendary Bleach author Tite Kubo make fan art of Kaminari skateboarding long ago. And then again, to celebrate My Hero Academia's anniversary, Kubo drew Shoto Todoroki in his style, and we don't really have to talk all that much about it. That's there. In a tribute to Kubo though, Horikoshi actually drew Mayuri and Nemu from Bleach and did an amazing job. Like, look at that Mayuri, and Nemu's as thick as ever. This eventually led to a special drawing to celebrate a certain moment between these two authors that we'll be discussing a little deeper on into these cool waters, but you can see an image here of Deku and Ichigo together. Kishimoto, of course, being as competitive as ever, couldn't let Tite Kubo have all the fun in the hero world, so he too joined the fray with his very own illustration of Shippuden Naruto cheering Deku on in the early stages of MHA when Kishi had some positive words to say about the series. And more recently, we've gotten a special illustration from Kishimoto featuring Naruto, Shikamaru, Deku, and Dark Shadow that just looks so awesome, with Tokoyami looking literally one-to-one in Kishi's art style somehow, fitting in like a glove. And also, Deku's just way taller than I ever picture him as in this art, because why is he Naruto size? He looks giant. Horikoshi himself has also drawn Naruto 2 separate times now. First, he drew Shippuden Naruto next to Deku in a cover for Shonen Jump where you can see both Deku and Naruto doing hand signs, and he also drew Shippuden Naruto once more in this illustration here where Naruto is doing a Rasengan holding a shuriken in his mouth. Lastly, you know that Horikoshi is a completionist because he was able to get art from the final member of the big three Oda himself. Oda drew Deku, which you can see here, and it's interesting how Deku's entire costume looks like it's made of leather in Oda's version, with of course the textbook Luffy face that Oda places on characters in these collabs creeping through, but not enough to completely mask the original Deku in this drawing. Horikoshi himself has actually done One Piece fan art that made it all the way to Oda before Horikoshi became a mangaka. In a special message to his readers, Oda revealed an old fan art of Smoker that was sent in by one of his younger readers back in the day, and it turns out that this was actually drawn by Kohei Horikoshi when he was younger, which Oda points out and finds amazing, saying that now the two of them are both making manga in the same magazine, meaning that anything can really happen and your dreams can definitely come true. Horikoshi's art exhibition. For My Hero Academia's anniversary, Horikoshi actually opened a special My Hero Academia Drawing Smash exhibit featuring hand-drawn original drafts of the series, 3D sculptures of the characters, as well as entire areas dedicated to certain characters or certain sections of the story, as the entire exhibit filled up the Mori Art Center gallery in Japan during February of 2021. There's an extremely detailed thread that I'll link below, or you could remind me to if I forget to, by Shibuya Smash, who attended the exhibit and broke down everything there was to see, but the big draw to this exhibit was the fact that Horikoshi himself worked on multiple brand new art pieces specifically for the exhibit that feature MHA characters in different situations that many saw as either hints towards what's coming or just to look at how Horikoshi himself views his characters. Horikoshi drew everything from a romantic scene of Deku and Ochako catching each other as they fall out of the sky to a picture of all of Class 1A, including Shinso and All Might together soaring through the clouds, and other pieces like this odd piece of Aoyama that hinted at his fate as the traitor. And all in all, this was just a wonderful treat, especially for people that got to attend the exhibit, and full images of all the art have leaked online, but I won't be sharing it here in this video out of respect and to avoid copyright issues. My Hero Academia's original sketches. Already on this journey, we've discussed Jack Midoriya, the early version of Deku present in Horikoshi's My Hero one-shot, the precursor to the full-on My Hero Academia manga. But did you know that this isn't the only prototype design for Deku? Before work on the full series was finalized, Horikoshi went through multiple prototype design stages, and we actually have those pages that we can go over. But instead of going over every single one, because we can save that for a separate video, it's actually a lot, we can just talk about some of the more notable ones. These include Deku's original design, where he was still a quirkless hero like in the My Hero one-shot, but now with a much more recognizable design. It looks like Deku, just edgier, and in fact this is probably the closest that we ever get to the vigilante Deku style look that Horikoshi uses for that arc. We also have designs for Bakugo, who started off being a much more kind-hearted or airheaded looking character who would have a personality change when it was time to use his quirk and throw the hero suit on. And another interesting tidbit is Ochako Uraraka, who didn't even initially exist, with her being replaced in the main group by Mount Lady of all characters, who was originally meant to be the same age as our students and another member of Class 1A. Another interesting design process was the one for All Might, who went from looking like an American stylized superhero ripped straight from out of a comic to a much more stylized and anime style look that you would instantly recognize as the character from MHA. I don't know what happened between these two designs, but the second design is just leaps and bounds better than the first one, and it's something that I can actually see All Might wearing during an earlier period in his career. Lastly, to give us some villains to look at, we have the original design for the hero killer Stain, who originally wore a long headscarf and kept his sword underneath a cloth with all sorts of daggers and weapons littered all over his assault vest, giving him a very tactical appearance. Stain also had some sort of mouthpiece that attached to his suit, and I wonder if this was similar to Toga's bloodsuckers on her gear, and if that's where that idea went in the final draft of the story. And here we're also able to see the original design for Shigaraki, and it is creepy. Shigaraki with all the hands-on doesn't really look all that visually different from what we're used to, but the main difference is on his arms, where the designs of his hands grabbing onto the arms are different and look more like forearm gauntlets of some kind, which I find really cool, and every hand attached to Shigaraki has long cords extending from it. The scariest thing about this design though is Shigaraki's original face, which didn't look anything like it currently does. In the original sketch, Shigaraki's eyes and mouth are pitch black voids, and he actually looks like something straight out of The Grudge or another classic Japanese horror film. And honestly, I'd love to see Horikoshi go back to this Sadako's well of inspiration for future designs in his future works. The Tenko one-shot. Speaking of original designs for Shigaraki, did you know that much like Deku and Jack Midoriya, there's actually an original version of Shigaraki that we can find in one of Horikoshi's one-shots that would go on to heavily influence My Hero Academia. The name of the one-shot is titled Tenko, and of course you know that this is the name of the main villain in the series, Shigaraki Tomura. The one-shot follows the story of a young boy born in a war-torn period in Japan where battles are solved with swords and armor, not strange magical abilities known as quirks. In this story, we see a girl who wants to be a warrior but is told that she can't because she's a woman and she should never hold a sword, something that mimics Deku's role in the actual My Hero Academia story, and it's interesting to know how many of Horikoshi's female protagonists share personality traits of Deku, making me wonder if Deku is only a boy because of some suggestions from Shonen Jump. Over the course of the one-shot, we learn that Tenko has an ability that he can't explain, where anything that he touches with both hands crumbles to dust. And of course, this mimics Tenko's ability in the My Hero Academia story, where the ability is known as the quirk Decay. In Tenko's backstory in this one-shot, we see that very much like in My Hero Academia, he has a very troubled childhood with difficult parents. One day, in a moment of anger trying to stop his father and mother from fighting, Tenko reaches his hands out towards his father, but his mother actually gets in the way. This leads to him using Decay on his family and deciding from that point on to stop any conflicts that he comes across, becoming a character known as the Battle Vandal, who appears on battlefields and instantly destroys all the weapons and armor, leaving both sides incapable of continuing their fight, or at the very least, incapable of causing massive injury. All in all, this one-shot is really sad to read because it paints a picture of how Shigaraki could have turned out if All For One wasn't the one who found him, and someone explained to him that his power had other uses as well, like saving and protecting others by crumbling away all of life's hardships with the touch of a finger. Quirkless Tenko. Staying on the topic of Shigaraki and his decay for a second, there's also a long-running theory in the My Hero Academia community, started by me, centered around All For One and Tenko Shimura that ties into several other theories in a complex web. However, it begins with Shigaraki's flashback in My Villain Academia. At the beginning of Shigaraki's flashback, he's brought home by a stranger who says he was causing trouble, and Tenko's mother thanks him for bringing Tenko home. We don't see the figure's face, but we see that they're wearing a top hat and a large black suit with a white undershirt, all fitting on a large frame as the man stood quite tall in the doorway to the home. From the moment this page was released, I theorized that this was actually All For One bringing Tenko home, and that the implication was that All For One was actually the one to give Tenko Shimura his decay quirk, and that it isn't a quirk that Tenko was born with from the start. To support this, we also have the fact that quirks stopped appearing in humans at the age of 4, and Tenko was already 5 by the time that his quirk manifested, something that even his father said he would have to accept wouldn't happen or it would only bring him ruin, much like Deku. Now, Shigaraki having a quirk that is nothing like any quirk in the history of his family, as well as the fact that his quirk seemed to go very strongly against the personality that Tenko had at the time, furthers the thought that something is wrong here. Beyond this, in Vigilantes, we have a clear and accurate step-by-step description for how All For One creates villains, and if you apply the step-by-step process to what happened to Tenko, assuming that this theory is true, it fits perfectly like a glove. To go on of this more recently in the series, during the Toya Todoroki backstory, we saw that All For One was retrieving Toya's body wearing an extremely similar outfit to the man who walked Tenko home, and when you pair that with the fact that Horikoshi constantly hides All For One's face or head in every appearance that he's in until he's revealed, it just keeps adding onto the possibility for this theory. Finally, we have the strangest coincidence in the entire story. Shigaraki is 21 and Deku is 16. Shigaraki got his quirk when he was 5 years old, during an extremely hot day, and summer in Japan is from June to August. Now, Deku was born on July 15th, which would have been during the same summer that Shigaraki originally unlocked his quirk. On top of that, we've seen in the introduction to the story that some people are born with quirks right away instead of developing them later on. On top of that, we truly don't know the nature of All For One and how taking quirks works at early stages, so what if it's possible that All For One stole Deku's original quirk and gave it to Shigaraki, and that could be why Hisashi Midoriya has been missing in action from Deku's life. Nana's hands. Speaking of other strange coincidences that went under the radar in My Hero Academia for a very long time, we have the matter of Shigaraki's extra hand. Over the course of the series, we've seen that Shigaraki is covered in hands, and eventually we learn that these hands are the hands of his family members that All For One and the Doctor kept for him to keep the memory of what he did forever and somehow stabilize his rage. Shigaraki initially has an obsession with the hand that he says is his father's hand, but over the course of the series, we see Shigaraki destroy this hand himself as he abandons all the hands during the My Hero Academia arc. During the Tenko flashback though, we see that at an earlier time, Shigaraki actually decayed one of the hands in a fit of rage using his decay quirk, but soon after, the hand was then replaced by All For One and the Doctor, who called it a little gift, and they didn't actually explain where the hand came from. During the events of My Hero Academia, despite every other hand being destroyed, there's one hand that Shigaraki still feels an attachment to, but with no way of knowing whose hand this was out of the group of hands that were on him previously, many fans just assumed that this was his sister's hand or someone else's hand that was there that day. But I believe in fact that this was the extra hand given to him by All For One. Now given that Shigaraki's hands were all from his family members, it wouldn't make much sense for them to use anyone else to replace the one that was missing. So we theorize that this was actually Nana Shimura's hand, and that after her loss to All For One, the villains had access to her body and used it for this purpose. To explain Shigaraki's attachment to this hand specifically, we reason that deep inside, Shigaraki was still holding onto the Tenko personality whose original goal was to become a hero. Eventually, when Shigaraki got All For One, we saw a visual of all of his different family members pulling him back and keeping him from going towards All For One, but Nana Shimura oddly appears in the place that one of the hands used to be in and pushes Shigaraki forward, saying never forget. This is meant to represent the way that Nana Shimura represents the hope that Tenko originally had to become a hero, and that it was never too late to still do something heroic. Recently though in the story, of course, it was revealed that Tenko Shimura was in fact hiding in there all along, so these clues around Nana's hand were really some of the earliest possible hints that this storyline of the inner Tenko was even happening. Do not be defeated by the rain. Many fans of the My Hero Academia anime are celebrating the Vigilante Deku arc, where Deku leaves UA and the atmosphere of the story changes quite a bit to a very rainy and moody tone. But did you know that Deku's name was actually inspired exactly by this sort of story? We've discussed the in-story meaning of Deku's name on the surface level, but the out-of-story meaning of his name actually comes from a poem by Kenji Miyazawa, and it goes like this. Be not defeated by the rain, nor let the wind prove you better. Succumb not to the snows of winter, nor be bested by the heat of summer. Be strong in body, unfettered by desire, not enticed to anger. Cultivate a quiet joy. Count yourself last in everything. Put others before you. Watch well and listen closely. Hold the learned lessons dear. A thatched roof house in a meadow nestled in a pine grove shade. A handful of rice, some miso, and a few vegetables to suffice for the day. If to the east a child lies sick, go forth and nurse him to health. If to the west an old lady stands exhausted, go forth and relieve her of her burden. If to the south a man lays dying, go forth with words of courage to dispel his fear. If to the north an argument or fight ensues, go forth and beg them to stop such a waste of effort and of spirit. In times of drought, shed tears of sympathy. In summer's cold, walk in concern and empathy. Stand aloof in the unknowing masses. Be dismissed as useless or Deku, then flattered as a great man. This is my goal, the person I strive to become. And this poem is actually about a person whose ideal is they want to be a person who is seen as useless instead of being seen as a great man, despite all the amazing things that they do. They don't want credit for all the things that they've done. They're okay with people looking at them as useless because it's not really the credit that you want from what you did, it's just knowing what you did help people. That is what a person like Deku wants the most. Racist Deku. During the release of Jump Force, a Shonen Jump crossover game featuring characters from various different ages of the legendary Japanese magazine that features our favorite stories, Deku became the center of a very troublesome meme in the gaming and anime community. It stemmed from an interaction that happens between Piccolo and Deku in the game, where Deku assumes that Piccolo is a villain, despite the fact that Piccolo has been a hero for years. This led to many making memes of Deku being racist towards Namekians, which only heightened when Shoto was added to the game, who was previously seen calling the human-dog hybrid detective from his series a mutt. These jokes would eventually die down just like the game, but not before some fun skits and memes were immortalized on the topic, forever tarnishing Deku's good guy persona. I mean, the only other green person I know is a villain. You aren't a villain?
You are literally wearing green, and I'm Goku's friend.
But you look so evil! Quirk-based discrimination. In My Hero Academia, something that goes under the radar for quite a while in the series is the constant quirk-based discrimination that some characters face. Quirks in My Hero Academia aren't just limited to cool, flashy powers that a person can use to wow everyone. Sometimes your quirk might just be as simple as a quirk that gives you the appearance of a bird or some other sort of creature. Other quirks even allow their users to change their bodies in strange ways, and over the course of time, civilians in the world of My Hero Academia began to draw a line between what is human, with these mutant quirk users being on the other side. Because of this, in many places outside of bigger cities in My Hero Academia, you can find quirk-based discrimination like what Shoji faced in his hometown that we find out about in his backstory chapter in the final arc. Shoji and Spinner have both been treated terribly by the people around them just for the quirk that they were born with, and it's something that really parallels the way that Deku was treated for not having a quirk at all, and pulls away the mystique and glimmer of even wanting to have a quirk once you realize how often it's used to divide people in the series. Now in the series, one of the main organizations still preaching these ideals is known as the Creature Rejection Clan, and ultimately they were taken out after a chance meeting with the League of Villains, who took them down after a comment that they made about Spinner. However, people of these sort of mentalities still exist in the world of My Hero Academia, as we've seen in the Vigilante Deku arc when civilians attacked the Foxwoman, who was still thick as oatmeal, just for walking through their town at night. Quirks and personalities. Complicating the issue of quirks even more is the fact that quirks heavily influence the personality of the person that has the quirk, largely shaping a lot of who and what that person eventually becomes. We've seen in the series that a lot of characters have names that match their personalities and their quirks, and this isn't just a coincidence or a naming convention by Horikoshi, since usually you can assume what kind of quirk your offspring is going to have and name them accordingly. But we've seen in My Hero Academia that the quirk itself also determines a lot about the likes and dislikes of an individual person. Take Toga, for example, who was drawn to blood because her quirk gives her the ability to transform into someone whose blood she ingests. This gave Toga a lot of trouble and really dictated the path that her life went down just because of the ability that she was born with. And you can see how in an age where you have someone like All For One going around, it would be very valuable to someone to have the chance to lose their quirk or even get a completely different one, showing exactly why and how that man came to power over the course of generations. Even All For One's quirk itself is a good example of a quirk that might be affecting its user's personality, as the quirk allows a person to pretty much take from someone everything that makes them who they are and claim it for himself. All For One is exactly the kind of character who shouldn't have this ability, but it's possible that no matter what, the person born of this ability would become this kind of person, so that's something to think about, especially when you consider other characters and their stories. Monoma and Toga. Staying on Toga for a second, we also have a strange theory regarding her character and her origins that ties her to another character in the series. Back in the day when it wasn't clear how many League of Villains members have family ties to other characters, a theory was released positing the idea that Toga was actually related to Nato Monoma from Class 1B. And yes, I'm aware that most of the fandom calls him Monoma or whatever. I don't watch the dub, so I'm not going to be pronouncing it that way. Sorry. But to support this, we have the fact that Toga's parents wanted nothing to do with her after her incident and likely changed their names due to the shame. We also have the fact that blonde hair isn't super common in the Japanese public, making us look closer at the few characters that do have blonde hair in the series. Pair this with the fact that Toga's family seemed pretty well off as far as we could tell in the flashback, and the fact that Monoma himself seems to pretty much give off rich kid vibes. There was definitely potential here, but ultimately over the course of the story with no sort of confirmation or even mention from this, from Monoma himself or any other characters, it's extremely unlikely that this plotline would ever go anywhere. Avatar: The Last Airbender. There's another group of characters that draw comparisons by My Hero Academia fans, and that of course is the comparison between the Todoroki family and the Fire Lord's family in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Shoto Todoroki has been compared to Zuko quite a bit, as both characters start off rather edgy and angry at their fathers, behaving like a man on a mission until the main character eventually straightens them out. You also of course have the scar in the same place on both of their faces, and the fact that the burn came from a parent, albeit different parents in each version. To go along with Zuko and Shoto's comparisons, we also have Dabi and Azula, the siblings of their respective counterparts, who both wield blue flames and have an obsession with being accepted by their father in favor of their brother. Eventually, these siblings would end up in a massive final battle with each other where blue and yellow flames would clash, further showing the parallels between these two groups. Horikoshi himself has actually denied any intention in the similarities between these characters, and Avatar itself either wasn't popular in Japan or or just didn't really air for there all that long, so who knows what the truth to this situation really is. The back you go theory. A popular theory in the fandom began by a user on a now lost forum, which was then taken to Reddit and finally shared with much of the fandom by Twitter user Audrey and then eventually the YouTuber TurtleQuirk, who had a viral video on the topic. The theory suggested that Bakugo would not only be a one-for-all user, but that he would actually time travel to achieve this feat, using Aries' quirk to rewind himself through time to become the second user of One-For-All. This was supported for a long time by the fact that the silhouette of the second user looked very much like Bakugo, at least in his outline. And then fans went berserk once the face of the second user was actually revealed, given how closely the two do appear to look alike. The differences though started to pile up, as the second user himself has red hair, which is different from Bakugo's blonde hair, and eventually we would even learn that the second user has an entirely different quirk and origin to Bakugo as well. Despite this theory being wrong, it doesn't mean that there isn't some sort of tie between the second user and Bakugo, and the second user being some sort of long lost ancestor of Bakugo might also explain the massive speed boost that Bakugo made use of during his final moments in the Shigaraki battle. As of now, we've yet to see where the plotline between these two characters is going, but many fans feel assured, especially after Shigaraki's flashback to the second user during his fight with Bakugo. So what do you think is going on here? All Might's death. Lastly, something that has gone under the radar for a while as other things have kind of picked up in the story is the fact that Night Eye's prediction about All Might's death is still active, meaning that All Might isn't safe from meeting a cruel end, especially now that the stakes are as high as ever in the final arc. In recent chapters, we've seen All Might heading to the battlefield with a briefcase that he's been holding on to ever since the Vigilante Deku arc, but we still have no idea what's actually inside of it. Many fans have speculated that it's a piece of gear that would actually allow All Might to get back into the fight. And after being gone for so long, this would feel really great for a lot of fans, but again, All Might putting himself in any danger is very bad here, considering that there's still a chance for Night Eye's prediction to come true. So do you think Deku will actually prevent it, or is All Might actually out of here thanks to this mysterious piece of tech, likely from David's shield? Now, All Might's death would really bring us to the end of a major era in My Hero Academia, but there was actually almost a time where My Hero Academia was ended due to controversy. And to discuss that, we need to go even deeper, where we'll find the truth behind the name that got My Hero Academia banned from an entire section of the world, as well as a full breakdown of All for One's vessel creation program from start to finish in the next video.